Tim, and welcome to Watch You Want. Thanks for logging on. Today, we're looking at one of the first complicated Royal Oak references ever issued by Audemars Piguet. You're looking at the Royal Oak Day-Date Moonphase 25594BA. Now, this watch represents the innovation that occurred in 1984 when, for the first time, Audemars Piguet added a day-date complication and moonphase to its 12-year-old Royal Oak reference. The great thing about this watch is that it preserves all of the essential features of the Gerald Gentra 1972 original, but it adds the additional refinement of a day, a date, and a moonphase. So you have a great complication of the classic look, the definitive look of the Royal Oak. You get an everyday complication that you can always use for easy reference, that is the day and the date. I know I refer to my calendar watches daily. And then you get the romantic, somewhat superfluous, but fun complication of the moonphase, which, if you've been watching the Salon International news coming out the last month, it seems is back in style for 2015 in a big way. So let's talk a little bit about this watch, where it came from, where it fits in the Royal Oak continuity, what it brings to the table as a standalone, and also how it wears, because I feel that whenever you're talking about a Royal Oak, which uniquely integrates the bracelet and the case with rather large lugs, you have to talk not just about the size of the watch, but how large it actually wears. And that's why I'm going to open this one with a wrist shot. You can see on my wrist, which is 6 1/3 inches, 16 centimeters, this is a full-bodied watch. Although nominally 36 millimeters across, this one measures just over 45 millimeters from lug to lug, and even then it's a little bit difficult to express what lug to lug is, because you can see those bracelet plots flow more or less seamlessly from the lug out into the bracelet, flaring it just a bit. I would say this wears not like the super case 40 millimeter Rolexes, but if you can remember, like the 5-digit Rolexes, like the Submariner 16610. This wears a lot like that. It wears like a 40 millimeter Rolex. So if you're familiar with those watches, if you had maybe a Bond Seamaster back in the 1990s, you remember that old blue wave-dialed Bond Seamaster that Pierce Brosnan wore? This wears almost exactly like that. So those would be your references for a comparable fit. What you get from this watch that you don't get from any of those is a sort of all-of-a-piece design effort, courtesy of the legendary stylist Gerald Gentra. When he designed the Royal Oak back in 1972, he designed it to be the first truly integrated sports watch with a bezel, case, lugs, and bracelet that flowed more or less seamlessly into each other, all designed to integrate, all designed as a piece, one continuity of aesthetic vision. And it really works that way, and that's why I say this is different from the Rolexes, which use end links to try to integrate the bracelet into the case, and I feel like that's worked less and less well as the case has flared over the years, whereas this Royal Oak from the distance reads almost as a bracelet and not as a separate bracelet and watch. So it has that jewelry aspect that really showcases Gerald Gentra's pedigree as a designer for Cartier and others in the jewelry industry. Now, the signatures of the Royal Oak were basically the bezel, the case, and the bracelet. And if you look at each one in turn, you can see the level of attention to detail that went into it. This octagonal bezel is iconic of the Royal Oak, designed to look like the portholes on British Royal Navy warships of the same name. They had a series of Royal Oaks through the centuries. The watch also features these signature Royal Oak aligned bezel bolts in white gold. You can see that the actual slot of the screw, it's not a screw, it's a bolt, I should mention, follows the circumference, so they're not out of alignment with the direction of the bezel in any given spot. And because they are white gold, they have a gorgeous color and polish contrast with the bezel itself, and the contrast is just compounded by the combination of the brushed top and the polished flanks. And that continues onto the case, where the flanks and the tops of the lugs are brushed, and then this ever so slight beveling is polished. That continues likewise onto the bracelet. You can see as I turn it through the light that little hint of polishing on the edge. Here you can really see it lighten up against the light box right here. But brushed on the top of the bracelet, polished just on this beveled edge. Not only is this watch in exceptional condition finish-wise, but it looks to have been lightly polished over the years, so it retains excellent definition and differentiation between the different facets that should be polished and brushed. And you can see that right here in stark relief. Now the watch continues another great tradition of the Royal Oak, which is the tapisserie dial. You can see that sort of waffle cut, the hobnail pattern that's cut into the dial. Now this was actually done by a subcontractor to Audemars Piguet called Stern Creations. If that name sounds familiar, it should be. The Stern brothers purchased, well, the Stern family really purchased Patek Philippe in 1932 because they were Patek's dial supplier, and Patek Philippe was their best customer. So Stern Creations continued producing dials for customers into the modern era, and Audemars Piguet up until 2012 equipped every Royal Oak and Royal Oak Offshore with a dial, a tapisserie waffle cut dial built at Stern Creations. So there's a great side story there and an additional pedigree in the world of high horology. And while we're talking about pedigree, we've got Audemars Piguet, Gerald Gentra, Stern Creations. Let's add another great name, Jaeger-LeCoultre. This watch features the Jaeger-LeCoultre 889 base movement with a Dubois de Praz day-date Moonphase module on top. The total movement is called the 2224-2825, and that's a great tradition that dates back to the roots of the Royal Oak story. In 1972, the very first Royal Oak used a JLC base movement, and that's a tradition that continues in some of the limited production models to this day. So you get that great continuity. You've got almost everyone, a who's who of Swiss luxury watchmaking, embodied in a single watch with this Royal Oak day-date Moonphase. You've got Audemars Piguet, you've got the Stern family of Patek Philippe, you've got Jaeger-LeCoultre, and you've got Gerald Gentra. Like I said, this is almost like a tour of Switzerland's Watch Valley in 136mm case. Now you can see this watch, which I should mention from a mechanical perspective also features a 50-hour power reserve, 45 joules, and 215 components, so there is substantial complexity and refinement in there, but you can see it in higher detail on our website, Watch You Want. I really recommend that because the highlight of any Royal Oak, no matter how complicated or historically relevant, really is the finish at the end of the day of the dial, the bezel, the case, and the bracelet, and this one is outstanding. Not only does the finish look factory, but the condition is immaculate. This watch is a time capsule. This watch is a great historical record of the evolution of the Royal Oak from the Gerald Gentra original to the fabulous complications of the present day. So please check out this Audemars Piguet Royal Oak day-date Moonphase, reference 25594BA on our website, Watch You Want.